Unit 8. Warriors Without Weapons. 2A. Listening 1. Warriors Without Weapons. Page 173.
This is Fresh Air. I'm Terry Gross. Journalist Michael Ignatieff spent a year traveling to the sites of volatile regional wars. He wanted to learn how war is changing and what that means for the safety of relief workers. In a recent New Yorker article called Unarmed Worriors, he wrote about the International Committee of the Red Cross, the new risks its unarmed members face in war zones, and the new controversies surrounding the group's position of neutrality. I asked him why he wanted to write about the Red Cross.
Page 174. Listening for Main Ideas. Part 1.
This is Fresh Air. I'm Terry Gross. Journalist Michael Ignatieff spent a year traveling to the sites of volatile regional wars. He wanted to learn how war is changing and what that means for the safety of relief workers. In a recent New Yorker article called Unarmed Worriors, he wrote about the International Committee of the Red Cross, the new risks its unarmed members face in war zones, and the new controversies surrounding the group's position of neutrality. I asked him why he wanted to write about the Red Cross.
As a group, I was very drawn to them because I thought they could take me into the whole world of what involves people in that kind of humanitarian relief work. From being interested in the Red Cross, I then became interested in the laws of war and came to see that the laws of war are a very different moral tradition than, say, the human rights tradition. And I began to see that there are two traditions at work out there in the humanitarian movement. One of them is, international human rights, which most Americans can identify with. And then there's this very different tradition called the laws of war tradition, which is basically trying to make sure that if people are going to fight, conduct the fighting according to certain rules. And that's what the Red Cross is trying to do.
Part 2.
Well, the International Committee of the Red Cross is trying to disseminate information about the Geneva Conventions, about the international laws of war. What are they trying to do? How are they trying to educate people who are fighting about these codes?
Well, I think, first of all, we need to back up a little and just understand what the codes are. There are these things called the Geneva Conventions, which were ratified by hundreds of countries in the basic document dates to 1864 and then it's revised in 1949. There are a bunch of rules that are quite simple. They simply say don't fire on ambulances, don't shoot on non-combatants, don't torture prisoners, allow prisoners to communicate with their families, allow the Red Cross to visit you if you're a prisoner of war, spare civilians. I mean, they're very house and garden common rules, and in lots of combat situations, they function more or less adequately. The Gulf War, for example, when the 100,000 Iraqi prisoners were taken, the United States subscribed to the Geneva Conventions, released them according to those conventions. So it's a system that, it's easy to laugh at. People say, you can't wage a war that's civilized. Well, in fact, the Geneva Conventions have done a lot to civilize certain aspects of war, and so they have a lot of legitimacy. I think something very interesting is going on there, an attempt to say the standards of decency that ought to prevail in the world are not white Western European values. They're human universals, and if you look deeply enough into your own traditions of warrior culture, you will find them. And that's what the Red Cross is trying to do. They're just beginning that work, but they're putting out comic books that tell the story. They're running radio soap operas to tell the story. They're not just sitting there reading out the Geneva Conventions. They're trying to translate them into new languages. And it's one of the most interesting bits of work that's going on.
Part 3.
Yes, and I think what I'm trying to get at here is that it's a sort of counterintuitive thought. One of the oldest moral traditions that all human societies have is the warrior tradition, the tradition of warrior's honor. The idea that a warrior has a very dangerous and therefore sacred responsibility. That is, his job is to protect the community and to engage in the infliction of death. Because that's a very dangerous and very serious task, men have to be trained for it. And they're trained not to simply unleash their aggression, but to control it and to discipline it and and use it for the benefit of the community. And those traditions then mean that there's certain people you can kill and there's certain people it's wrong to kill. There's certain ways of waging war that are honorable and certain ways of waging war that are dishonorable. Most modern military forces attempt in some way or the other to subscribe to those very ancient codes. And I think we forget, partly because war has become so awful and so horrible and so devastating, we've come to equate war with pure barbarism and pure savagery. It seems to us to be a zone where morality cannot prevail at all. And so it's a rather counterintuitive thought that, in fact, the warrior's honor is one of the oldest moral traditions in the world. And the Red Cross is trying, in a way, to simply institutionalize that culture, remind people that in their own cultures they can find elements of a warrior's honor which should restrain their people.
Page 175. Listening for details. Listen again to Listening for Main Ideas. Page 176. Reacting to the listening. Exercise 1. Excerpt 1.
And I began to see that there are two traditions at work out there in the humanitarian movement. One of them is, international human rights, which most Americans can identify with.
Excerpt 2.
I think something very interesting is going on there, an attempt to say the standards of decency that ought to prevail in the world are not white, Western European values. They're human universals.
Excerpt 3.
And so it's a rather counterintuitive thought that, in fact, the warrior's honor is one of the oldest moral traditions in the world. And the Red Cross is trying, in a way, to simply institutionalize that culture, remind people that in their own cultures they can find elements of a warrior's honor which should restrain their people.
2b. Listening to. Michael Ignatieff's Views on War. Page 177. Part 1.
In your article about the Red Cross in the New Yorker, you wrote that witnessing the Red Cross and traveling to all these war zones challenged your views on anti-war culture. What do you mean by that?
Well, I'm a Canadian. I was very involved in the anti-war, anti-Vietnam protests that were centered in Toronto during the 60s, because Toronto was an anti-war center because so many draft evaders and draft resistors ended up there. I grew up in the anti-war culture of my generation. I think what I discovered in the Red Cross's approach is an alternative ethic, which is that, you cannot abolish war. You can't do without war.
Part 2.
And war, in fact, is a natural, necessary, and sometimes, dare I say it, even desirable way to solve certain social conflicts between ethnic groups, and oppressed groups sometimes can only use war to free themselves. Well, if that's the case, if we can't abolish war from human culture, then we better find some way to tame it.
Part 3.
And that's the ethic that the Red Cross lives by. And I think the simple rules that the Red Cross tries to enforce, which is you don't shoot prisoners, you don't make war on non-combatants, you try and stay away from civilian targets, you kill people, you don't torture or degrade their bodies.
Part 4.
Just very, very simple rules of humanity are an important addition to civilization, and there is no necessary reason, I suppose this is what I've learned, to equate war with barbarism. There's a distinction between war and barbarism, and we should keep to that distinction and struggle to ensure it. And the Red Cross, that's what the Red Cross tries to do, and I don't want to sound like a recruiting sergeant from the Red Cross. I'm critical of some of the things they do, but I did learn that from them, and I respect this morality.
Michael Ignatieff, I want to thank you very much for talking with us.
Pleasure.
3. Focus on vocabulary. Page 179. Exercise 1. 1.
accept, accept.
2,
Access, excess.
3,
Advice, advise.
4,
Effect, effect.
5,
Assure, ensure.
6,
Counsel, counsel.
7,
Disinterested, uninterested.
8,
Eminent, imminent.
9,
Imply, infer.
10,
Principle, principle.
4A, Pronunciation. Page 185. Exercise 1.
Cat, cot, cut.
Page 185. Exercise 2. 1,
Cat, cot, cut.
2,
Cap, cop, cup.
3,
Lack, lock, luck.
4,
Gnat, knot, nut.
5,
Hat, hot, hut.
6,
Lag, lock, lug.
Page 185. Exercise 3. 1,
Cot,
2,
cap,
3,
luck,
4,
nut,
5,
hot,
6,
lag.
Page 186. Exercise 5.
Government funding, public controversy, natural disasters, cultural values, lack of money, gunshots, a bloody struggle, floods and famines, a bloody battle, savage attack, a practical discovery, love of country, a challenging task, a tough job, combatant's conduct.
Page 186. Exercise 6. 1,
A block from the gun battle, the cops found a black bottle full of gasoline.
2,
A lack of love and trust made him lock the clock in the closet.
3,
Nat did not eat the nuts.
4,
The big black bug bled black blood.
4D. Speaking topic. Page 191. Exercise 1.
Ever give a gift that didn't go over real big? One that ended up in the closet the second you left the room? There is a gift that's guaranteed to be well received because it will save someone's life. The gift is blood, and the need for it is desperate. Over 20,000 people must choose to give this gift every day. We need your help. Please give blood. There's a life to be saved right now. Call the American Red Cross at 1-800-GIVE-LIFE. This public service message brought to you by the Advertising Council and the American Red Cross.
Page 191. Exercise 2. Listen again to Exercise 1. Unit 9. Boosting Brain Power Through the Arts. 1B. Sharing Information. Exercise 1. Page 194. Mozart's Sonata for Piano in F major. First movement, Allegro. Pianist Bora Kim, a 14-year-old student at Ichimura Music School in Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey. Two A. Listening 1. Does music enhance math skills? Page 198.
Just how music enhances mathematical skills is unknown. It may be by the more general effect of increasing self-esteem, or maybe something neurological happens in the brain. Or maybe psychologist Andrea Halpern from Bucknell University suggests these children are learning how to learn.
Page 198. Listening for Main Ideas. Part 1.
This is All Things Considered. I'm Linda Wertheimer.
And I'm Noah Adams. Most schools offer music and art classes to give students a well-rounded education. New research indicates those classes may do more for students than just give them an appreciation of the arts. According to a study in tomorrow's issue of the journal Nature, studying music and art can significantly advance a child's reading skills and especially boost math proficiency. Michelle Trudeau reports.
A class of 6-year-olds getting a special music lesson. Part of a special arts program that researcher Martin Gardner and his colleagues at the music school in Rhode Island designed for several elementary schools in the state.
We started out wanting to see the impact of arts training in some first and second grade kids.
So some classrooms had an extra hour of this special arts curriculum incorporated into their normal school week.
And other classrooms getting the standard curriculum in the arts, which was pretty standard for Rhode Island and rather representative of the country as a whole.
The standard curriculum, say the researchers, gave students music lessons twice a month and art lessons twice a month. The typical music lesson tended to be somewhat passive, says Gardner. Students listened to tapes and concerts and talked about music in class. In contrast, the special arts classes met twice weekly and got students actively involved as a way to teach them the basic building blocks.
The kinds of skills that they are learning in these grades are, in music, they're learning to sing together properly, sing together on pitch, sing together in rhythm, sing together songs, and in the visual arts, they're learning to draw shapes and deal with colors and forms and so forth.
A very interactive, experiential approach that took advantage of children's natural inclination to master enjoyable tasks and build upon sequential skills.
And at the end of 7 months, all the kids in the school took standardized tests. And we looked not only at how the teachers rated the kids on attitude and so forth, but also how the kids scored on their tests.
And here's what the researchers found. First of all, those kids who'd entered the first grade toward the bottom of the class in reading and then received the special arts program for the year had now caught up to the average in reading.
And that in itself is wonderful, but in addition, they were now statistically ahead in learning math.
Dramatically ahead in math compared to the kids who had not received the special arts classes throughout the year. The researchers found also that the kids who continued their special arts classes for a second year continued to improve in math.
Part 2.
Psychologist Frances Rauscher from the University of Wisconsin at Oshkosh says this is an important study showing that a group of typical children, regardless of talent or parental involvement, can reap benefits from arts training that affects other academic areas, especially math.
It's getting as close as is absolutely possible to the real world. You know, these are kids that are already enrolled in schools that are just simply assigned to these different groups, this test group and this control group. And what they're finding is a strong effect in the improvement of mathematical ability as measured by school standards. So this has real general, real-world appeal.
Rauscher's own recent research could help explain why arts education might have this additional benefit. In her study, a group of 3-year-olds were given music lessons in preschool, piano and singing. Rauscher found they scored significantly higher on a particular IQ test that measures abstract reasoning, a skill, adds Rauscher, essential to mathematics.
Training in the arts, and particularly training in music, enhances the ability for children to understand proportions and ratios. And that's obviously a skill that's very important for mathematical reasoning.
Just how music enhances mathematical skills is unknown. It may be by the more general effect of increasing self-esteem, or maybe something neurological happens in the brain. Or maybe, psychologist Andrea Halpern from Bucknell University suggests, these children are learning how to learn.
In other words, you can learn skills, but you can also learn about how you learn things. And that seems to be a hallmark of the true mature learner, that they know how to learn things. And it's possible that these early interventions might be having some effect in children knowing how to attack new material.
Whatever may be going on in the growing brains of children, both psychological and biological, these new findings underscore an increasing awareness among scientists and educators that a rich learning environment can significantly enhance children's intellectual development in unexpected ways. I'm Michelle Trudeau reporting.
Page 199. Listening for details. Listen again to Listening for Main Ideas. Page 201. Reacting to the listening. Exercise 1. Excerpt 1.
The standard curriculum, say the researchers, gave students music lessons twice a month and art lessons twice a month. The typical music lesson tended to be somewhat passive, says Gardner. Students listened to tapes and concerts and talked about music in class. In contrast, the special arts classes met twice weekly and got students actively involved as a way to teach them the basic building blocks.
The kinds of skills that they are learning in these grades are, in music, they're learning to sing together properly, sing together on pitch, sing together in rhythm, sing together songs. And in the visual arts, they're learning to draw shapes and deal with colors and forms and so forth.
Excerpt 2.
Rauscher's own recent research could help explain why arts education might have this additional benefit. In her study, a group of 3-year-olds were given music lessons in preschool, piano and singing. Rauscher found they scored significantly higher on a particular IQ test that measures abstract reasoning, a skill, adds Rauscher, essential to mathematics.
Training in the arts, and particularly training in music, enhances the ability for children to understand proportions and ratios. And that's obviously a skill that's very important for mathematical reasoning.
2B. Listening to Music, Art, and the Brain. Page 202. Part 1.
Your child's brain is the subject of this week's cover story in Newsweek. To discuss it, we have science editor Sharon Begley. Thanks for joining us again, Sharon.
Hi, Warren.
What parts of an infant's brain are already physically set at birth?
Really, the only things that a baby is born with are the circuits that do things absolutely crucial for life, keeping the heart beating, breathing, controlling temperature, reflexes, things like that. And, of course, a baby can see and hear. A baby has the primary senses when he or she comes into the world. But the rest of it is still a work in progress.
Part 2.
I was fascinated by some of the research on music and the relationship to other kinds of reasoning, particularly mathematics. I mean, I'd always assumed that musical talent and mathematics kind of went together because they had something to do with each other in terms of filling puzzles and in terms of, you have mathematics involved in setting out the beats to various kinds of music. It's divided into bars.
Yes, music itself is highly mathematical, and that made some neuroscientists think that somehow the patterns of firing in neural cells were similar as in mathematical abilities and logical thinking and spatial reasoning. So what they did is give 2- and 3-year-olds, little preschoolers, lessons in singing and in piano. And after several weeks of this, the children were much better at solving mazes on pieces of paper and copying geometric shapes. So it seems, again, that these circuits were sort of primed to be wired up, and music somehow did it.
But it also turns out that the wiring for both of those things tend to be right next to each other.
They're in the same part of the brain, this old right side of the brain that we've heard about for years, yeah.
Part 3.
I have to say, though, that in your reporting, there, as a father of children, I get two reactions. One fills me with excitement that I really have a very significant role to play in how my children grow up to be able to solve things and to be able to live their lives. But the other reaction, and it's a little bigger, is sort of scary. The notion that so many windows are closed so early that by the ages of 3 and 7, I may have already blown it in so many areas.
Well, I feel the same way. Mine are 10 and 7, and I look at all these missed opportunities and think, oh, God, I should have been doing this or that or whatever. I think we should not panic parents.
Part 4.
If you love your child, if you do very simple things, again, we're not talking about this crazy super baby stuff from the 1980s. This is really paying attention to your child, playing the kind of games that your grandmother played with your parents, peekaboo and where did the object go. It's paying attention and trying. And, if you blow up at your kid or whatever, you're not going to scar the kid for life. We're talking about repeated patterns of how you play with and interact with your child. But, yeah, I felt the same way.
4A. Pronunciation. Page 209. Exercise 1. 1.
Music appreciation.
2.
Art education.
3.
Critical ingredients.
4.
Parental involvement.
5.
Music class.
6.
Top performance.
7.
Math theories.
8.
Abstract topics.
9.
Math proficiency.
10.
Reap benefits.
11.
Research findings.
12.
Geometric shapes.
Page 210. Exercise 2.
Standard curriculum. A critical ingredient. Art classes. Boost brain power. Research challenge. Typical lesson. An interactive approach. Logical thinking. Self-esteem.
Unit 10. Television and Freedom of Expression. 2A. Listening 1. Interview with Newsweek Entertainment Editor. Page 223.
President got what he wanted out of the television industry, a pledge to develop the rating system necessary to program electronic V-chips that could automatically block sex and violence from individual home screens, at least in the hours children are watching.
Page 224. Listening for Main Ideas. Part 1.
President got what he wanted out of the television industry, a pledge to develop the rating system necessary to program electronic V-chips that could automatically block sex and violence from individual home screens, at least in the hours children are watching. Clearly, the industry was responding to pressure from the government and a disgusted, if somewhat hypocritical, public. And even President conceded that the ratings V-chip combo would not itself end the trashy tidal wave sweeping American society, or American culture. It's only a panacea if you promise a panacea, but it'll help. Newsweek television editor Rick Marin looked into the debate over TV ratings and the V-chip, and he's with us now. Rick, thanks for being with us again.
Thank you.
Part 2.
We hear the ratings won't cover news or sports, but what about raunchy news magazines, talk shows?
It's that's unclear. I think talk shows would fall under the category of entertainment. I'm not sure whether, like, a current affairs, hard copy, trashy news stories would be considered news or entertainment, since often they have neither news nor entertainment in them. But the focus of it is just the bread and butter programming of television, the TV shows and the primetime series, and also movies that TV picks up from Hollywood.
Will the ratings and V-chip combination block out whole shows or just offensive parts?
It would block out the whole show. So you could presumably program your TV to just pick up shows that were either G or PG rated, and you could lock it and unlock it as you wanted, so when your kids are watching, they couldn't see anything except wholesome stuff, and then when you're ready to sit down and watch, you'd flip a button, and then you could watch, NYPD Blue or whatever you want.
Part 3.
Some researchers last week reported that adult ratings actually attract young audiences, but isn't that exactly what the V-chip is supposed to counteract?
Yeah, the problem is the V-chip technology is going to take a while to penetrate, the culture. If you buy a new set, you've got one, but if you stick with your old set for another 10 years, you're not going to have one. So before you have the V-chip, you're going to have this rating system. And yes, studies have shown that, just as any of us who were kids remember, if you put a forbidden fruit label on something, that just makes us want them even more. There was one study where some kid said the cooler the movie, the higher the rating.
But Canada is already experimenting with some form of this. What are the results there so far?
The Canadian results have been encouraging to people who want this kind of stuff. They've done they did experiment with 250 families in 4 cities in Canada, and all the families that tried it out loved it. It was a very elaborate system built into the cable boxes, and it was very successful. That said, we got to remember that Canadians have always loved violence less than Americans, and regulation less than Americans. So who knows if it'll take here as well as it has there.
Page 225. Listening for details. Listen again to Listening for Main Ideas. Page 226. Reacting to the listening. Exercise 1. Excerpt 1.
that's unclear. I think talk shows would fall under the category of entertainment. I'm not sure whether, like, a current affair, hard copy, trashy news stories would be considered news or entertainment, since often they have neither news nor entertainment in them.
Excerpt 2.
So when your kids are watching, they couldn't see anything except wholesome stuff, and then when you're ready to sit down and watch, you flip a button, and then you could watch, you know, NYPD Blue or whatever you want.
Excerpt 3.
And yes, studies have shown that, you know, just as any of us who were kids remember, if you put a forbidden fruit label on something, that just makes us want them even more. There was one study where some kid said the cooler the movie, the higher the rating.
2B. Listening to. Interview with former chairman of MPAA Ratings Board. Page 226.
Next, we turn to Richard Hefner, Distinguished Professor of Communications and Public Policy at Rutgers University. We caught up with him in Sydney, Australia at the Office of Film and Literature Classification. Dick, welcome to Newsweek on Air.
Thank you for inviting me.
You should be flattered that TV is taking up your model, but in fact you are opposed to voluntary ratings, even with a V-chip to lock them into family viewing. Why do voluntary ratings work for movies but not TV?
To me, the most important thing was that the glory of the movie rating system and the genius of it was that it incorporated a box office intermediary between children and harsher media content, harsher movie content. It incorporated that into the rating system. And my concern about today, with its incredible number of media inputs in the home, means that there is no box office intermediary.
You say that society would benefit from non-voluntary regulation and that it might actually save the entertainment industry from full-fledged censorship. How would regulation work and not be censorship?
Well, censorship means that someone has told you, you may not do this, and that someone is almost invariably government. I'm too much of a Jeffersonian, I'm too much of a civil libertarian to be able to swallow the notion of a censorship. I don't want it, David. I don't want it at all. But I do think that regulation by blue-chip entities, not by putting the fox in charge of the hen house, but by putting public-spirited, clearly identified individuals, whether it's the head of the PTA, whether it's the head of the American Psychological Association. I'm thinking now of a system in which almost by statute, your leadership is concerned essentially with the public interest.
Richard Hefner, thank you very much.
Thanks, David.
4A. Pronunciation. Page 232. Exercise 1. 1.
Will the ratings and electronic blocking devices block out whole shows or just offensive parts?
2.
So you could presumably program your TV to pick up shows that were either G or PG rated.
3.
But if you stick with your old set for another 10 years...
4.
All the families that tried it out loved it.
5.
We caught up with him in Sydney, Australia.
6.
You should be flattered that TV is taking up your model.
7.
Rick Marin, a magazine editor, looked into the debate over TV ratings.
8.
Manufacturers are reluctantly putting them in.